Hey up, friends. How's it going? It's Matt. You listen to the Looking Sideways Action Sports podcast. We're on episode 90. Blimey, not long now until episode 100. I'd better pull my finger out and start working out a guess for that one, eh? Anyway, for this episode, I've got a really lovely, ruminative conversation with snowboarder and filmmaker Elias Elhardt. Now, I first met Elias in Innsbruck in January 2019 when I was over there snowboarding and also getting ready for the veritable trial by fire that was the Burton Hub show. We were introduced by our mutual friend Birgit Gruber, hit it off and agreed that next time I was in town we'd sit down and record an episode of the podcast, and that's exactly what happened in June 2019 when I was greeted by a very different scene indeed in Innsbruck actually. This time around, instead of piles of snow, summer was in full bloom, and with it a treacherous scene as all that snow had melted and swollen the river into once in 100-year levels apparently. It flows right through the middle of the city, and there was a funny vibe in Innsbruck, a semi-excited pre-apocalyptic air as everybody wondered whether the river would breach its banks and whether the frankly flimsy-looking inflatable flood barriers would protect the old town. Spoiler alert, I think they did, but it was quite mad to see anyway. I met up with Elias just before I flew back to the UK, and we headed to his apartment overlooking Innsbruck to record this episode. And I was looking forward to it, partly because of that initial conversation in January, and also because I know from his work that, well, he's a very intelligent and thoughtful lad, as well as an amazing snowboarder, obviously. And the best evidence of both of these strands of his character, and a film I highly recommend you watch before listening to this episode, is his last project, Contraddiction. Now, Contraddiction, there's two D's in that, by the way, is what you might call a treatise on how to reconcile the essential uselessness of the snowboarding lifestyle, especially if you've spent your life dedicated to it as a professional, like Elias and peers such as Gigi Ruff and Arta Longo, who also appear in the film, have done. Now, naturally, the snowboarding is amazing. The cinematography is also intriguing, mainly because it doesn't use the same perspective and angles we've all seen a million times before. But above all, Contradictions actually got a point of view. It's got an opinion and a perspective above and beyond. Woohoo! Snowboarding's great. Well, above and beyond most action sports films, actually. Basically, I very much recommend it if you're looking for a counterpoint to 99.9% of the films that get banged out these days. So we discussed that, and we also discussed his latest project, which saw him spend 5 weeks this winter in Kosovo, exploring that scene and looking into what that very particular area says about snowboarding in particular, and indeed life in Europe in general in the year 2019. As you might be gathering, Elias has got a lot of very interesting thoughts about snowboarding, and also about how activities like this link to self-awareness, and perhaps how there might be something a little bit more to this whole business than just simply sliding sideways, and that it might, as a professional, behove him to use his platform to investigate this possibility. In this, he takes his place alongside peers such as Christian Haller, Jerome, Tanon, David Benedek, who are also exploring similar themes in their own work. Now, obviously for some listeners, this line of thought might be a little close to dinner at Pete and Bernie's philosophical steakhouse, if I can quote the great Alan Partridge. But as you might have gathered if you've listened to, well, any episodes of this podcast, this type of chit-chat is right up my boulevard. So I was really into this one. Great chat, great perspective from Elias. And hope you enjoy it. I'll be back at the end. But here it is, my conversation with Elias Elhardt, another dimension. Enjoy. How you doing?
Good, yeah.
Yeah? What's going on?
Well, we just walked over to my place.
To your crazy place, which is in this... So you're saying this is like an old brewery?
Yeah.
Like the Adambrouw?
Adambrouw, yeah. It used to be a brewery, and now they built apartments here. And it's actually friends over there having exhibitions in this other building. And that's how I knew it. And I was looking for a long time for a new apartment, or just to move in the city. I was always living outside the city for a while, and now I moved together with my girlfriend, and we looked for a place, and then this came up.
Super unusual, like amazing views across the city. I really like the way it's obviously kind of like reclaimed industrial as well.
Right.
I mean, not the most visual medium, obviously a podcast, but there's this crazy old building outside, which is obviously part of the old brewing process maybe, which has been converted as well. And, you know, out the front, there's incredible views of the mountains. Yeah, nice spot. You must be stoked.
No, I'm super happy. And we moved in November, and then there was a season, so we didn't really settle in all that long. And now it's nice that the season has ended, and I really got time. See, like, I'm still trying to organize the whole space. And
yeah,
nice.
And handy for the train station, like literally 30 seconds away.
That is the best part.
So you can get out when you need to. So how long have you lived in Innsbruck?
Maybe like 8 years.
Yeah. And so do you have a routine in the winter when you're here? Like, do you have places that you kind of like to ride, or is it just generally see what's going on?
It actually changed. The routine always is connected to whatever project you're working on. And,
because so much choice here as well, right? You know, you're just surrounded by so many amazing mountains and so many options.
Yeah. So I filmed a lot with pirates, many years, and mostly I was filming with Gigi.
Yeah.
And Gigi lives on the other side of the Arlberg tunnel, close to Bregenz.
Yeah.
And so we would always meet at Arlberg, you know, and that like really shaped the routine, what you referred to in some ways, like filming with Gigi. And that was kind of our common ground where we met. But it's still, you know, an hour 15 by car or 1.5 hours by train. So still quite some distance. And I think since 2 years, since Contraddiction and also the Balkan project now, I, you know, wasn't bound to that anymore, or restricted in some ways, like, you know, finding a common ground. So I've really explored more the mountains here, and I think I've mostly just been riding mountains within like 20-30 minutes of drive around Innsbruck, which was really nice. So it somehow changes the routine.
Yeah, I mean, it's a life's work really, isn't it, to explore this part of the Alps, because just so much good terrain, so many places to learn about, you know. I guess you're never going to exhaust it, are you, really? I mean, it's always both, right? It's so beautiful to really getting to know something and really making it your backyard in some ways. So I also like to just do that and really spend some time in some place. And then obviously it's also nice to like discover something new and you know, so I like both. And for me, it's just been so amazing to have it so close, so nearby. You know, some days I was like, all right, today I really try to get things done, you know. And then I look out the window, as you can see, and then I was like, no way, I'm just going. 20 minutes later, I was just like snowboarding. That is quite a distraction, especially when you've had the winter with this much snow. You must be open that front door and be like, actually, I'm going to go up there. Because it looks pretty good today. So you mentioned the Balkan project, and you mentioned that you sometimes like to explore a particular area. Was that part of the appeal of that project then? Because we met in January, and you were talking about, we just were having a beer in the bar, and you were saying, oh, there's a place in Kosovo, right? Like it's a resort, right?
Right.
And you were kind of stoked because it's a bit of it's weird in Europe, isn't it? Because everywhere's so well known. So when you find these little pockets like this, that's really, because I was a bit like Kosovo, you know, like, okay, right. You just never even heard of it as a ski or snowboard destination. But obviously the old Yugoslavia actually has this big heritage of winter sports. I mean, the Olympics were there in, what was this, like 84, right? And, you know, we were talking, I've actually been lucky enough to do a little bit of exploring around the Balkans. I've been riding Serbia, been riding in Slovenia, which I guess counts. But Kosovo didn't really consider that. So how did you hear about that place?
Well, it's funny that you say it's, you know, it's so unknown in a sense, and I think that counts for more than just the snowboard scene. I mean, all of the Balkans are so close to Europe, really. So
close.
They're so close, and Kosovo is as well. We drove down there.
Well, it's closer than Greece, which is obviously, you know, for Brits, for example, you know, like holiday destination. You know, everyone flies there every year, or Turkey. But there's this exoticism, isn't there, to like the Balkans still, which is but it is just part of Europe. It's I mean, it's to do with the history really as well, isn't it?
Yeah, and that is really why I was so interested in the region. I really wanted to just spend time there. I knew that there was some snowboarding. I didn't go down there to like find the greatest snowboarding.
No, well, you wouldn't go there for that, would you?
No.
It's the cultural and the, like you say, the things that come with it, right?
Right. And snowboarding is just such a great access to like meet people and be part of their community so easily. And that's really what I was looking for. And then I also went down with my girlfriend in the summer, like I guess a year ago, and we just explored the places. And
so you did a little recce.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
I just really wanted to come down with a good idea and, you know, who I could portray in some ways.
Right.
Like, while Contraddiction was a bit more like on like my friends and my own thoughts on
almost like an internal.
Yeah, a bit more.
Yeah.
And I knew that this was, you know, I was great to do, I was glad to do that project. But then the next one, I really wanted to focus more on a subject and
so it's
other
like
people.
like an outward facing thing. Like something.
I'd say so.
Okay, right.
Yeah, I mean, I really see myself more as like the vehicle to get there, or to like maybe connect a few people and dots. But I'm happy that now we found a really cool place there and the people that can tell their own story.
So you had this idea to find this project for a while, by the sounds of it, to do something quite different from Contraddiction, where you focused on a place or an area and tried to explore it a bit more thoroughly. Yeah.
Well, I guess in comparison to what I was doing before Contraddiction, it is still like much more similar to like Contraddiction, to try and have a subject that you want to emphasize on and use snowboarding as a vehicle or as a kind of base to build this story on.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, it was kind of similar. I just knew that, you know, I didn't want to like go around my own thoughts, you know, another project or anything like, and therefore I was happy to have this idea with the Balkans and really just explore there and look for a good story there that could be told.
So, and what was the appeal of the Balkans then? What drew you to that part of Europe?
Yeah. Well, I always look for, I guess, stories that really naturally make sense with snowboarding. You know, in Germany we have the saying, I don't want to pull things by the hair. You know, to just, you know, you can try and squeeze some other aspects into like such a snowboard film, but if it doesn't really fit, it's really like, it doesn't really work.
Yeah, you can't force it.
You can't force it. And I think therefore I was really just looking for natural places that could say more beyond the snowboarding in an authentic way, in a good way. And for me, what I also had in mind before, you know, now there is such the rise of nationalism really all over Europe. Yeah. And the one thing we have with snowboarding is having such a strong common ground. Yeah. Really globally.
It transcends those kind of day-to-day, well, not day-to-day, but like you say, an issue that's recurring like nationalism. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in particular in Europe, you know very well.
Well, and also like it's interesting with the Balkans, isn't it? Because that's almost the first modern manifestation of this new form of nationalism, right? With the fall of the old Yugoslavia and how that territory then divided upon ethnic grounds, and those territories fought for their own identity in a very overtly nationalist way, right? Basically.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's why I thought it was so interesting to see where it's at now.
Right. So that was where you were. That was the kind of the idea behind it. That's really interesting. So what did you find?
And it's actually interesting. A lot of people would refer to the old Yugoslavia as a construct, as what we see the European Union being, you know. I mean, it was more of a country, but still it had its own units, you know, it had its own identities, but they really, I think a lot of people speak quite highly about it. I can only repeat what, you know, people said. In a sense that they found a, you know, common ground to like live in old Yugoslavia. And then there had been, you know, the breakdown of Yugoslavia after Tito's death, and you know, the national identities became so much more present, and the differences that divided them became so, in a sense, instrumentalized as well, and so much more important in some ways, and that, led to a catastrophe after all. And I think now it just is not all easy. It's still, underlying conflicts, and, you see the flags of the different nations and everywhere and stuff. But I feel like I was looking for a positive story where people actually do meet and, find common ground. And that place, Brezovica, where we've been, is a good example for that, where actually it was owned by Serbians. And, Kosovo as a region was split from Serbia, from former Serbia. It was just as a region from Serbia, and then they kind of wanted their independence as Kosovo Albanians. And so this place, or like this ski resort had been really abundant for more than 20 years since that war, because there hadn't been really like much security and investment. And now it's slowly starting to come together again, where, they just work together, the Kosovo Albanians, the Serbians living there.
Really? So those ethnic tensions have started to relax enough that you can have these kind of leisure activities that have obviously get quite quickly sidelined in an environment like that. Right, that is really interesting. So, because that whole region, the history of it is basically, like you say, religious and ethnic territories kind of joined together by different, originally like Habsburg Empire, and then and then Yugoslavia, and when they were removed, then these tensions kind of come out, right? And it wasn't that long ago either. That's the thing. It's only like 20 years ago, really not long ago.
99.
So it's taken that long for the tension to dissipate to this point, right, where people are almost having normal lives again. It is really, a sensitive topic to talk about over there as well. I'm sure.
In particular, of course. And it's hard to also make any assessments as, an outsider. But I can only say like the day-to-day experiences I've made with the people that I was hanging out with. And I could see that there is still, and what I hear from the news too, is like that there is still some tension, and, like they come and go, I guess. But there is also the drive forward and the wish to overcome that and just work on. They have so many other problems, really, economical problems and healthcare, a lot of on many levels. And so therefore, I think a place such as Brezovica, ski resort, it really isn't common and first on priority list. On the other side, it's a place for, that gives a certain hope, jobs, hopes for prosperity in the region. And so therefore, that's how they can find common ground there. So I can see why when you try to tell a story and an original story or something that's not been told before in snowboarding, it's a great angle, great thing to focus on. So how long were you there for? I was there for 5 weeks altogether.
Okay. And was it just you, or did you have filmers with you, or how did it work?
It was funny, so my girlfriend was down there too. We both actually, she got a job down there. What's her name? Isabel.
Okay.
Yeah, Isabel. She was working for the foreign aid for German government.
Okay.
On the development of the region, only as a contractor, but it was great because then we both actually worked really close by. Like she worked in Skopje in Macedonia. And that's 1.5 hours drive from where I was based at. And so she would always come over so that was nice. We were both the whole time there. And then filmer and photographer, came and mainly photographer. It's Carlos Blanchard. Very good friend and great photographer. And also he's been the only photographer there and really an important part of the whole project.
Okay.
Also on a creative side, I really just love having him a part of it.
So it's quite collaborative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All the pictures you see around him is mostly from Carlos.
Yeah. Yes.
He was an important part. And
Yeah.
then Alex Tank.
Yeah. I don't know him super well, but I've met him. Yeah. He's involved in Contradiction as well, right?
Yeah, he was involved in Contradiction. He's really helping out at Contradiction, filming and everywhere he could help. And I was really like stoked to team up for this project. He's a great filmer and an editor, and on many levels he was really contributing already and is now. So yeah.
And did you have other riders coming out or was it mainly just you?
It was the locals and myself, and Marcus Keller was there at the start of the trip. But that was just because one trip, we had a team trip in Albania, and I basically drove down with Isabel and then did that team trip for a week in Albania. And then I just continued to Kosovo, and Karsten, who was a filmer at the Nitro trip, and Marcus Keller, they just continued with me to this new resort and spent a few days together there, and then they went home and I just stayed.
Right. And so is there a scene there? Is there like a local scene, like local snowboard scene, or?
Yeah. I would say so. I mean, it's very different. It's, very open.
Yeah.
It's not like snowboard scene or free ride. We have a much more divided scene. Yeah. There's just like winter sports scene, I guess.
Stoked on it. Yeah.
Yeah. And they just gather in this place.
Yeah. And I guess they don't really get many people coming through to kind of explore it. So I'm sure you got a good reaction, right?
Yeah. That was the best part about it, really. To spend this long in one place, I guess after all, it was a bit of a month. I really became a part of it in a sense that, all the local, it really isn't that big at all.
Yeah.
And so I really got to know all the locals, and it was so nice, and they were so welcoming.
Yeah.
It's incredible. Yeah.
So I'm interested in the way that you approach these things, because in Contradiction, I've heard you talk about how, it sounded like it was, you had a pretty particular idea before you made that film, and it was something that was kind of quite well developed, and you kind of knew what you were trying to convey, and then the film, when you put it together, that was the process.
Yeah.
Was it different in this case? Did you have because obviously you've explained you were looking for effectively a bit of a metaphor to explore, but did you wait to see what unfolded as you were there? But was it different in that approach? Like you kind of went there to immerse yourself and then see what story you could tell? Yeah.
I think it was more open for sure than Contradiction.
Yeah.
Although even Contradiction, it may seem so set in stone now, but like a lot of changes were there also throughout the season.
Yeah.
But still, like there, I obviously couldn't know a lot of things. While in Contradiction, I did it with my best friends.
Yeah.
And
you knew what you wanted to talk about as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We've talked about these things 100 times before.
Yeah.
And it was easier to get right to the point, and those things were really helping. While there, I just knew the protagonist that I wanted to focus on, Hamdi.
Okay. So who's that?
Well, he's from there. He's Kosovo Albanian, and he really grew up in this resort and experienced it throughout its whole history, or before the fall of Yugoslavia, as a prosperous resort, really. And he was one of the first ones to come back to it after the war and rebuilt it in a sense, and is really like, he really stands for Brezovica in a sense.
Okay. So he's a big part of it.
He's a big part of it, yeah. We really focused on him a lot. And he's a really good and passionate snowboarder.
Right.
And that just made him such a perfect protagonist that could tell his story.
Yeah. So have you got a way of explaining what it's about then? Do you know what it's about at this point, the film? Well,
what we already kind of like framed, it's just in development still. It is a bit asking how you can, leave maybe a history that weighs heavily behind and build something new, and and what common ground you could find through our passion as well, through winter sports, through snowboarding, what that can give, and Well, the name, I think, is going to be Narciss.
Narciss. As in narcissism.
No, but it is, it's funny. It can be referred in many ways, I guess. But I think we're all pretty happy with that name.
Yeah.
Because once Hamdi actually said it in a conversation, he was like, the narcissus is one of the first flowers after the winter.
Okay, right.
And then,
yeah, that's nice.
Then again, that was a nice image,
Yeah.
Like, we don't want to lift this unnaturally, like, oh, this resort is some sort of solution, also it's very privileged people, come there, but still it is a nice little, place to discover and portray, really.
Yeah.
And that may be the angle that we want to take, not too heavily, like not going into any topics we shouldn't take on, but we're trying to like make a sincere story on this place and around Hamdi's history, how he lived through it, and really make it a like visual journey as well. I mean, the crazy thing about it is like there used to be 5 lifts. Now there's 2 running sometimes.
Right.
So there's a lot of abandoned lifts and a huge abandoned hotel, for instance, that's in the middle of the village down there, and it's called Narciss.
Right.
That huge hotel that used to be a 5-star hotel, and it just you walk in there and it just carries so much weight.
Yeah.
And so I think the idea is also to just let the images speak, and it shouldn't be too tightly framed of what we want to say. It really is like a certain mood we're gonna try to convey, and what we experienced there too, and that was like a time travel in a sense too. Sure.
Well, I was going to ask you what memories stand out then, because I'm sure that kind of trip there must be some great experiences.
Yeah. So really the people.
Yeah.
I think that's without a doubt that was the best part about it, was just the warmth we were welcomed by. Like, it was just so amazing. Like, I started shoveling a jump, for instance, and 5 minutes, if that at all, some people would just come up with shovels and started helping, and it was just so amazing.
Yeah.
Like, just the way we were kind of integrated, or people would invite us over for for lunch, or even driving through the countryside. We were not only in the resort. When we drove through the countryside, we stopped in some place where a woman was cooking something, and it was apparently like their traditional dish, some sort of pancake that's like layered and layered over one another. So you have like a package of pancakes in some ways. So can't remember the name at the moment. Anyway, she was just there showing us, and the kids were playing outside, and then they gave us like a huge portion of it because they were so happy that we were kind of like there and interested in having a chat. And those experiences just added up throughout the trip, and that was the best part.
Yeah, we had a really similar experience. Went to Lebanon snowboarding years and years ago, and it sounds really similar. We were trying to shoot a handrail, and it was in front of this woman's house, and she came out. She was like a whole woman. She was like, she's a bit like, and obviously we just thought, we're going to get told off, we're going to get kicked off.
Yeah.
And she was like, what are you doing? And we were like, oh, so, how do you explain that? So we were like, she was like, you're playing, right? And we were like, yeah, we're playing. And then she was like, do you want some food? And we were like, yeah, okay. And then, she cooked lunch for us, brought us in. She was just an old woman that lived on her own, took us into a house, made us lunch. And we were like, okay, yeah, cool, let's go for lunch. Same thing, so many experiences like that. We built a jump again to try and, so we were using the car to like drag people in to hit this handrail. This guy drives past, he's like, what are you doing? We're like, oh, we try to do that. He's the same. He's like, oh, my car's faster, we'll use my car. He spent the whole day shuttling people, and so you kind of get immune to the fact that doesn't really happen anymore in the West, right? But that's the amazing part about when you travel to these places, because they're just so hospitable and, like you say, so stoked that you're there, really, that you're showing an interest. It's really rewarding, right?
Yeah. Oh, totally. I get another story. When we drove through Albania, it was quite late in the night, and we were on some pass, and I was in the back, and Isabel was driving, and then we passed by this guy. It was really in the middle of nowhere. We didn't even know how he got there. And he was, I don't know, waving. We didn't really understand what the signal was. And so we were like, all right, well, we stopped, but a bit suspicious, like, okay, what's going on? Then we try to communicate about, like, it was hard because he was speaking English.
Yeah, we're snowboarders, but
yeah. And what he wanted. Yeah. And we just like said, oh yeah, we want to go to Brezovica or to Kosovo. I guess that point we were still in Albania, so we just wanted to like find the way there. And he like got in the car. He was like, oh yeah. He got in the car. And then it took us, I don't know, 15 minutes of driving and then calling his cousin who spoke a little bit of English to find out that he only got in the car to drive with us to like show us the way.
Right. Yeah, I mean, amazing. Like, yeah, I'll just come with you guys. Yeah. All right, see ya. Yeah. No, it's brilliant. Yeah. That's why same as you, by the sounds of it, really loved those trips where, snowboarding's fine. It's all well and good. But those are the experiences that are kind of make those trips a bit more memorable and, feel a bit more worthwhile in some way. Yeah. So how was the riding?
Riding was good. I was just thinking about one spot, for instance, quite similar to your experience with the handrail. One guy came out and local that we befriended with, and he said like, hey, you want to check out my roof? Like actually this roof, like, right. So that was the best part about the riding. We just rode in the city and used this kind of like terrain. Yeah. And I was like, oh, great. That's actually really good. You had a really good eye for it. Yeah. And so we built that jump onto his roof and down behind and in a nice little landing. Yeah. So
you got to be creative with it as well.
Yeah.
Right?
I think that's what we did. I mean, also for the story we wanted to tell, we really wanted to connect it to the place and not just look for, a great, I don't know, powder face. That really wasn't the point.
Let's go build a jump.
Yeah. And therefore I stuck mostly to the town.
Amazing.
And that was fun. Like I went back into like a little bit of street riding. Yeah. If you can call that at all. Like around houses and stuff.
But a correct, like to find the riding to suit the environment and the story. Yeah. Which will presumably give it another dimension as well. Yeah. So are you working with the same production people that you used for Contradiction?
No. Curate, they were helping with Contradiction a bit like on the, I guess, logistic side of just dealing with the money and, making a contract and this kind of stuff. It really like gave the framework, which was nice. I also tried to really downscale it a bit for this project and take the experiences that I've made from Contradiction and work in a tight little crew. And that was the aim. Yeah.
That was a long project, right? Like 2-3 years, maybe?
It was, close to 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a long project.
So how do you feel now when you look back? Because obviously it's been out a few months and Are you proud of it? Are you stoked?
Yeah, I'm really stoked. And it's actually nice now, the winter has just ended and Contradiction went so long that we only released the film in January. We did the whole premiere tour throughout January and released it online in February. And that was when I was in Albania already. So we jumped right into the next project. And then, from there, I just basically been snowboarding and doing a lot of other things. And so now it's nice to like calm down a bit and digest it and look back, like you said, onto Contradiction as well. And I'm really happy about the whole thing. Yep.
Yeah. So it sounds like you had been thinking about it for a while and that you'd been discussing the themes of Contradiction with friends like Gigi and Arta for a long time. Yeah. So where did it come from? When did you start thinking about snowboarding in those terms?
Well, I guess I was questioning what I was doing always.
Really?
But it just became louder and louder.
Right.
Until I couldn't ignore it and try to find a more, say, honest approach to it. Not saying that it's like I was so conflicted that I just didn't see value, but I thought that I saw so much value that I could never, let it go at all anyways, but I wanted to find a bit more honest approach towards it. And that's, like I said, has been a process where it just become more and more important.
What? So when you say honest, that's kind of an interesting term to use. Like, can you explain that a little bit? What you mean by that?
Well, I think what we do with, snowboard filmmaking, we're always creating worlds, like little bubbles, so to say, of a virtual reality. It's not, it's obvious film, that's what it's about, to create a certain world. And that's also beautiful, to like take people with you and take them to like amazing places, say, be it Japan or other places, and, show the beauty of snowboarding. And that's amazing. But it also is very, say,
contrived, like fake in a way.
Yeah.
Well, it's, in a way, without being too reductive about it, it's marketing, isn't it?
It is marketing after all too. Yeah. That is the reality of it too, and is one-sided maybe.
Yeah.
It's not like I want to say this is the wrong side. It totally is, and is a legit and perfect portrayal of snowboarding and the beauty of it. And I think it got a lot of us into it in the first place. Such films.
It conveys. They convey a message about a very attractive, appealing message about what these cultures and sports are about, right? That's what they do. And even my experience as somebody that's worked in media and putting together, the trip that I mentioned for Lebanon, let's just say that, it's a magazine trip, and ultimately you're wandering around and you're not just going riding, you're trying to find shots. Obviously we know what it's like, and it's contrived as well. It's fake. It's like you try to tell a story about a type of snowboarding, aren't you? And there are degrees of truthfulness to that, aren't there? Really?
Yeah. Maybe fake sounds like it's not true.
Yeah.
I think it has its total legitimacy.
Fake's a bit harsh, maybe.
Yeah, because it is one side of it, and I think an honest approach is more that I'm not saying the other thing is not honest, but like it may just be lacking a bit of other perspectives onto it.
Well, it's very one-dimensional.
Maybe that's a good way to describe it. And I think, you were asking me like, how did I come to the concept of contradiction and stuff? And I think as a child, you grow up, or as a young person, you grow up and get into snowboarding, and that's all you want to do. And that's really what we built the film around as well. Like a certain one-dimensional love for what you do is so beautiful, and I don't want to take anything away from it or call it fake or anything. If
I can just say one thing as well, like you wouldn't have a career if you didn't have that single-minded focus that gives you as well, because that you don't get where you are unless you have that absolute single-minded dedication and focus to snowboarding, right?
Yeah.
So that's another kind of layer to it, isn't it, as well? Like it's necessary, isn't it? If you're going to try and that's something that you and Gigi talk about in the film, isn't it? Basically, this idea that you've worked hard. He says something like, I work my ass off, but it's a job. I've always kind of thought of it as a job. It's that thing, isn't it, as well? It's another interesting layer to it.
Yeah, totally. And it is so beautiful also to really immerse into something and really identify with it. And that's amazing. The thing is, though, when you grow up and it just gets maybe more dimensional, like layered and maybe contradictory in some ways, where it just isn't just that. It may be that and that, and they may not fit together. And I think that is what I mean with honest. It's just to like show a bit more. And one way to describe it is to like the most honest love letter that I could, the most beautiful love letter that I could write would also be the most honest one.
Yeah.
Because it would be the most credible one.
Yeah.
And the one with the most weight. And I think that is the idea behind the film as well. To paint yet another like perfect picture, I don't think is really like...
Well, it's not authentic, is it? Which is another interesting thing, because at one point that narrative that we're talking about was original, wasn't it? Like, this, but the longer the longer the sports progress and the more that same story is told and the more that one message is conveyed, they become less and less authentic and less honest, if you like.
It just becomes something that is repeated for just to repeat it because it's a certain standardized concept. And I think it totally was 100% original. Yeah. And it is just nice to also see a few fresh perspectives, which there are out there as well. Like, it's just like, I guess it's just nice to have both, some really action focused films that celebrate, the progression and beauty, and some that take on a little bit more on the narrative side. And I think it's nice to have a mix of both. Yeah,
like you said, there's room for it all, isn't there? So do you admire any of the work that's going on right now? Do you think anybody else is looking at it in this way?
Yeah. Well, we were just mentioning David.
Yeah.
Benedek.
David's always had a super original eye on this, right?
Yeah. I'm probably going to catch up with him this weekend. But like from your podcast, I love that episode that you talked with him about. I thought that was really great. Obviously, that's not a film, but he had been involved in really like making something new and reinventing it in some ways. And I love that. I guess he went away from like the seriousness and progressive focus onto like a more fun approach with his films. And 91 Words for Snow was also like one of like an amazing film.
Super groundbreaking.
Yeah.
And the older it gets, the more groundbreaking it looks, really.
Yeah. So that just to like one person that comes to mind right away, but like to say someone right now, Christian Halle with his films. He's a very good friend, and I'm so blown away by his films.
Again, a unique eye on it, and an unusual, very individual, very honest perspective, right? Yeah. Only he's going to make those films, which is great. I mean, that's what it should be, right?
Yeah. And he also shows that there doesn't need to be any, talking. Like I maybe feel more comfortable with this approach of narrative storytelling, and that's okay, but like he does it without even any word being said.
Very impressionistic.
Yeah.
And manages to convey the feeling in a way that isn't like super pretentious or it's accessible. It's fucking difficult to do.
Yeah, and very sincere, like all those of his new film Glue. Oh no, Soft. The Glue was the one before Soft. If I think of the moon segment where he's riding in the moonshine, and it just has such a power. It's just a beautiful image which just moves you in some ways.
I really like Jerome Tanon's film as well.
Oh
yeah, I thought that was brilliant because that was very much about this side to professional snowboarding that we were just talking about. The kind of the routine. I thought that was so well done because it was funny as well.
And both. I mean, he Eternal Beauty of Snowboarding. Did you see his new film, Sabadas?
Yeah, Sabadas is brilliant.
Oh my God, so good.
Yeah.
I really respect that work. Really good.
So do you feel that with these, this questioning that you've been doing, if you like, did Contradiction help kind of give you some closure on those feelings?
Yeah.
Do you feel kind of like you have the right perspective now?
Yeah. I think it just helped to be more content with what you do. I think that's, for me, it was about that I wasn't gonna like draw yet another perfect story of like how different it should be done. I think that's just as, questionable. It should be to find a, say, honest approach of what you do, what you love, and to, then try and act accordingly, knowing that you won't find the exact perfect, way of doing it, like there will be contradictions, but I think it's much better to live with them in a say outspoken way, and to really stick to your values and try to like live accordingly. As time passes, you change things, and that has been a really important step and change for me.
How was the response to the film? Was it generally positive? Because there is definitely a strand in action sports where people don't really like the idea of over intellectualizing this stuff, and kind of there can be very much like, oh, it's just snowboarding, like, you know, whatever. We're all really privileged, and, you know, we're overthinking it. Did you get any of that kind of reaction to it?
Yeah, that's actually surprising. Not really much at all. Like, I couldn't think of any voice, but there is a good point to it. You know, we are really privileged, and, you know, to like over intellectualizing it and stuff. I think it's a really thin line that you're walking on if you're trying to like say more than, you know, the actual sport. And still, it is such a great platform to do that.
Yeah.
And I think we, especially looking onto like bigger pictures or like big topics, you want to look through it on an as small window as possible, I think, to really get a grasp of it, and not like, again, like German saying, like, not to lift too heavily.
Yeah, sure.
You know, it's easy to do that with snowboarding if you're opening up too many topics and you're going to talk about, like, I don't know, a philosophical topic you want to bring in, you know. That's easy to like lift too heavy.
Definitely been guilty of that in the past. A couple of old White Lines readers probably when I think back to some of my articles, but I completely understand your point.
I think it is still such an amazing platform to do that. We have such a community that is really open to look into some new perspectives and do it on the ground of snowboarding. And I think it offers such an amazing, say, framework, foundation, and like to tell stories.
You've got the platform as well, so you can explore these in an interesting way. And I think the fact you're so conscious of the line as well, you know, the fact that you're aware that there's a pretty fine line, and you could stray too far one way, you know, then you definitely could be open for criticism. But I think if you're aware of that, that's a good place to be, isn't it, basically? So what about away from snowboarding? Because obviously what we're talking about here is you growing up as a rider since you were a kid and having a career and having these opportunities, and you said it was there from almost the start, that it was something you were conscious of, that there was basically a wider world out there. Like, have you been exploring this in ways away from snowboarding as well?
Actually, I always wanted to study, and it wasn't possible right from the start because, you know, I got out of school and I really focused on snowboarding, and that was great. But that was an urge that was also getting like more and more, that I really wanted to study in the summers. And so I studied psychology, or, you know, for a few semesters at least. And that was, nice to be someone else as well. You know, I was the student and I had these other topics and friends, and that was great. And apart from, say, this other thing that I was doing in a real institution, I always was just interested in other topics and try to like, be with other people that did things other than snowboarding. Keep curious. And also in snowboarding, I mean, Arthur, Marco, those guys that are in the film as well, they're so interested in so many ways, and I think that was also like we just shared these interests and could talk about a lot more than snowboarding. And for me, my best friends just came through snowboarding, and then we grew up together. Now Marco is doing his PhD in astrophysics, really different, and so I don't know. I tried not to like find the other world like away from snowboarding, but through snowboarding there was just a lot as well to explore. And have you given much thought to any of the projects then after, because it sounds like you're quite in the middle of this latest project, but have you got more ideas for the future?
Things to explore.
I think I'd like to continue in this path, really, like to use snowboarding as a framework, as a platform to tell stories, and show snowboarding in its beautiful way, and you know, use that really for filmmaking, and learn a lot in that field as well. And that's really what I get excited about now for the future. I love the thought of like just having the chance to learn in the field of filmmaking myself and discover something new, really.
When you're thinking about snowboarding in this way, and you know you've dedicated your life to it in the way that you have, do you have to try and protect what it was that attracted you to snowboarding in the first place, like so you don't become too kind of cynical or jaded about it? Is that something you have to work quite hard at?
I think it's important to like get back to these points often, like really give yourself space for it. At the beginning of our conversation, I was telling you about like how sometimes I just can't keep being here inside, and I just need to go out and ride a few runs. And those days are so important, that are not where I don't have an objective of reaching any sort of like, I don't know, shot or, producing content or whatever. And it's nice to like connect to like, oh, just nice to play around with your board. And I think that is super important. And if you lose it a bit, if you work, I don't know, if you're trying to achieve too much, and it becomes, say, an own dynamic where it becomes only, I don't know, performance based or whatever.
Yeah, and that can erode it, I guess.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that can take a lot away from the own, like the pleasure that you'd have.
Did you have to learn that as you got older, or were you always quite good at kind of protecting it?
Yeah. I think maybe that helped. I can't really snowboard so well if I'm like really not feeling it.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I could really, I'm snowboarding the best if I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah.
And if I'm feeling really like present in that. If I come to a point where I really like more force it and feel more disconnected, I can't even ride well.
Right.
I don't think.
Right.
So I had to take a step back.
Yeah, I guess
for that reason already.
I guess everybody can kind of recognize that a little bit as well. Probably not to your level, but you have those days where basically it's all working for you and it all feels like what you should be doing, right?
Yeah. I mean, and again, if that is the case, even if you land your trick, what you want to portray is pleasure, right? You want to portray the beauty and pleasure of snowboarding. And if you don't feel it yourself, it's hard to act.
Yeah, exactly. And it'll come across. It's almost like that paradoxical thing that we were talking about earlier. Like people can see it. They can read it, can't they?
Totally.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so nice to watch Iggy or Nicholas or a few people that you're like, oh, wow, this looks like fun.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that's really a crucial aspect of what we do. And therefore, I think throughout the whole career, it's always important to like maintain that connection in some ways.
Yeah. So what will you do in the summer? Obviously, we're at like start of June. So do you ride the summer as well, or do you look forward to this kind of time off?
Yeah, I don't think I'll snowboard really.
You're not going to go to New Zealand or?
No, no.
Yeah.
Although it's funny, we're really close to glaciers here, that some of them are
for
almost
a little while
year round open.
For a little while longer.
Yeah. No, but I'm happy to also like really groove into summer now and wrap my head around other things, and it's so nice. I'm really enjoying that now. Yeah.
Nice. Well, I really enjoyed that, man. Thank you so much, and thanks for letting me see this amazing view. It's been great. Yeah. Thanks, man.
Thanks for having me.
So there you go. That was my conversation with Elias, and I hope you enjoyed it. After we stopped the tape, we ended up going out for lunch, and as is often the way, I think I said this after last week's episode with Steve Douglas, actually, we ended up having another chat that could quite comfortably have made up another episode of the podcast. And the whole thing actually got me thinking about how I would change things about the way that I do this as we move into the big 3 figures. Now, please humour me, because I might explore this thought a little here. I mean, feel free to turn it off and get on with your life, obviously. But if you are one of these diehards, oops, that was me kicking the dog bowl over. Sorry, Peg. That listens all the way through to the end, then stick with it. I mean, it's kind of linked to 2 other perennially popular topics that crop up every now and again: the length of the podcast and whether I should film the fucking things. And I guess really it's also about the environment in which I record the episodes generally. I mean, I travel light, I've got a Zoom recorder, and I've got 2 SM58s basically, and I usually do it on the fly in a 1 or a 2 hour window. Now that's got its pros and cons. I mean, it means I can be flexible, as I was able to be in Innsbruck when I recorded another episode, and we did it in the park watching the river go by, which was really nice. I mean, there's a lot to be said for that, but there's also a lot to be said for having, I don't know, a studio set up where guests come to you hang out with them all day, you record a nice leisurely 3-hour episode, and you film the whole thing for YouTube too. As I've said before, it'd be nice, wouldn't it? Unfortunately, the reality is that's not really where I am right now. I mean, this was something that particularly did Owen's head in while we were in the States. That's the dog drinking water, if you can hear that noise. Get in there, Peg. Yeah, we're in the States, and I'd absolutely jam-packed the schedule so we could get as many episodes done as possible. we'd be driving to a new interview, and Owen would be like, how long have we got with this one? And I'd be like, like 2 hours. And he'd be like, right, so I've got to get shots and you've got to bang out an interview in 2 hours. It's not enough time. We should be spending the day with them. We should be surfing with them, hanging out, having lunch, doing pictures, doing the interview. It'd be well better. I mean, he's obviously right, Owen, as he usually is, but that just isn't the scenario here. So to bring it back to Elias, like I said, that's kind of what happened here. You know, we did the interview. It was great, but then we went off and did more stuff. We ended up chatting about loads of interesting things that if I did have the above set up, would probably have led to a nice 2-hour filmed episode rather than a 1-hour episode. You right, Peg? And the other thing is, I'm fitting all this in around my real job and doing pretty much everything myself. And this was brought home to me recently when I was having a pint with a mate of mine who makes TV shows. And he was like, so just so I understand, right, so you book the guests, you produce each episode, you write the scripts, you do the research, you organise the third parties, and then you present it, and then you do the interview. And I was like, well, yeah. And he was like, well, in the real world, you know that on TV, for example, interviews get absolutely everything done for them, and then they basically get handed research crib sheets and a script to get their heads around. Their job is to literally turn up, do the interview, and establish a connection with the subject to make sure that interview is really good. And I was a bit like, yeah, I guess I've not really thought of that. But my point is, this is the reality of the thing, which of course does lend it a certain character and charm of its own. But it also means that there are built-in limitations, one of which can be that they're not that long as people would like them to be. I mean, of course, I'd like to do what Owen says and get all rich roll on the thing, you know, move to Malibu into a mansion, have a studio. People make the pilgrimage to come and look in Sideways. All right, I'll settle for Port Slade, which is where I live. But it's going to take a little while for that to happen. So in the meantime, this is what we've got. We've got me interviewing people with my little handheld recorder. You know, I'm intrigued to see where it's all going to lead, I must say, because it's obviously leading somewhere. But yeah, it's not perfect. That's what I'm saying. And I guess I am going to segue actually into, you know, the usual, if you like it, share it, because I mean, it is important, you know, it's about building an audience. And like the more people listen to this, the more clout I've got. And, you know, perhaps one day that shed in the garden with the studio in and Ed Templeton knocking down my door might be a reality. I'm only saying that because he's turned down the chance for me to interview him about 5 times now. But anyway, well, that turned into a bit of a rant, didn't it? What can I say? I've had a few weeks off from doing the podcast. And it turns out in the meantime, I've had quite a lot to get off my chest. I mean, I was going to talk about live podcast updates and a few other interesting developments that have come in, but I think I'll leave that for a future episode. In the meantime, thanks for listening. Usual please, really, you know, share it. Say hello on Instagram at We Look Sideways. Email me at podcast@wearelookingsideways.com or have a look at the website www.wearelookingsideways.com and maybe even buy some merch. All right, nice one. I'll see you next time.